Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining tonight's Unlocking Nature Talk, brought to you by the Leadership for Conservation in Africa. It's absolutely wonderful to have you all here, and thank you for your ongoing support. To all the family members that have been joining us since for the last 2 years, just a little bit over 2 years, it's absolutely wonderful. For those of you who've joined us for the first time tonight, it's wonderful to have you part of the family. So every Thursday evening when we have our talks, we have people send in photos, and you can send in your photos as well if you want us to share them with the world to lca.webinar@lcaafrica.org. And tonight I have one of Cheryl Ogilvy's photos. So Cheryl, I'm going to maybe ask you to unmute. Aisha, if you can help me. Ask Cheryl to unmute and just tell us where this photograph was taken, because I have a very good idea.
If I'm choosing the right Cheryl, yeah.
Let's see.
Okay, I got the right one.
Okay, wonderful. Cheryl, would you please tell us where you took this beautiful photograph that I call endless?
Yes, we had an amazing Botswana trip where we had a family gathering, and this was on the booze cruise where we just started to network and just have a lot of fun and get to know one another. And somehow the sun just came up and it just said, hello, take me. And it's life, it's nature, and it's one of the most amazing. And you're right, it is endless. It just carried on and carried on and carried on. And all I can say, it was a very great trip. And Richard, you live in an amazing place. Botswana is good. You're relaxed, and it's wonderful. That's all I can say. And we were with amazing people. So endless friends.
Endless friends to endless friendships. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then we have a quote. And tonight's quote I took: "Land really is the best art," from the weird and wonderful and late Andy Warhol. For those of you who don't know who he was, an artist, but that's really, I think it rings true. From Cheryl's photograph and everything that we know, land really is the best art. Lovely. And then coming attractions. So every Thursday evening we are here at we start at 7 o'clock South African time, and stuff to look forward to next week. Clive Horlock. Clive is not here with us tonight, but we do have a video of him introducing himself, which I will play now.
Good morning, LCA. Unfortunately, I'll not be able to join you this evening as I do not have access to an internet connection until Monday. But perhaps you can convey more details regarding my intended presentation for next Thursday. My intention for next week is to delve more deeply into the Bushman psyche in order to try and determine how their culture and spirituality serve to avoid the dysfunctional way of living modern humans practice today. "Are your eyes nicely open" is the translation of a good morning greeting used by the Gwi Bushmen, which can also be interpreted as a question asking whether we understand the root cause of the conservation challenges we face today. Fascinating also are the facts emerging from modern science, which give credence to the beliefs of the first people. Listen more. I look forward to sharing with you and listeners next week.
Wonderful, a lovely introduction there by Clive Horlock. So we look forward to his talk. Then on the 2nd of June, we have Lynn Quick with her talk, "Studying the Past to Conserve the Future, a Paleontological Research in the Cape Floristic Region." So those are some of the things to look forward to our up and coming Thursday evenings. And then for those of you who want to go back and watch some or all of our videos that have been done over the last 2 and a bit years, you can go to our YouTube channel. All the information's on your screen. It's youtube.com/c/LC Africa /videos, and you will find all of our previous talks there waiting for you to go and discover. Some of them, there was one by, excuse me, by Masida and Desmond Ball, the catalyst and collaborate and create, and how a community can empower itself. Then we also had Peter Mills with conservation and sustainability. So those are two of the previous talks that have happened that I missed. And I'm going to give over to Johan Krier, who's going to introduce, well, not introduce, but tell you a little bit more about Share Screen Africa. Johan, the screen's all yours.
So in a nutshell, Share Screen Africa is where we share the expertise of conservation experts in Africa who present virtual learning events to classrooms all over Africa. And yeah, we thank our presenters. Specifically this week, I would just like to mention that we had a fantastic presentation from the Two Oceans Aquarium by Krish Lewis in the Jellyfish Lab. And yeah, just a huge thank you to the Two Oceans Aquarium for that contribution, as well as the Black Mamba's anti-poaching unit. Specifically Colette and Felicia that presented this morning, with Craig and Valeria that helped in the background to make it all possible. We really appreciate the effort. The students from TUT really enjoyed that presentation. So coming up, the 27th of May, we have Jeannie Cowell talking about sharing space, how elephants, tourists and guides coexist. And that is part of the Elephant Secrets series that we are running over a few months. It's always running on the last Friday of the month, and it is aimed at tourist guides. So all of the guides in the room, please join us for this presentation as well. Ruan, the next one, thank you very much. And then next week we are welcoming to the Rethinking Wildlife Security series Nick Funda, who is currently head ranger of Sandparks. It will be a fascinating presentation. He will be answering the question, what is a ranger? And for more upcoming events, please visit sharescreenafrica.org/events. We will keep on updating that page. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johan. We all look forward to the up and coming talks. Then if you know of anyone or you yourself would want to give a talk on unlocking nature, please give us a shout, send an email to the email address on your screen, and then we will make space for you and connect. And then over to Kirao Lennox for tonight's presentation, and I'm going to hand over the screen to Colin Jackson, who will be introducing Kirao and what the talk is all about. Colin, this screen's all yours.
Many thanks. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for this chance to introduce my colleague Kirao. I work for Arusha, Kenya. We're a Christian conservation organization based on the coast in Kenya. Arusha works across the world in 21 organizations, 21 countries, and Kirao is one of my leading colleagues, and Kirao grew up next to the Arabuko-Sokoke forest, which is one of our key sites of particular interest for the conservation work we do. He grew up in the village and then ended up managing to study hard and get to university, did his degree in environmental science, and then during that came to volunteer with us at Arusha and showed a real passion and an interest for birds and trees. So he came on really as and has been helping me on the sort of bird work mainly, and has been quite involved in quite a bit of citizen science, which we are quite involved with as Arusha, particularly the Bird Atlas project, which I'm sure he'll mention to you. But actually his passion is really in trees. And so he's done a lot of work helping push forward our sort of tree research work that we're doing. We're creating a nature reserve, and he's been doing quite a lot of vegetation surveys there, and also leading the whole work on camera trapping for mammals. So he's very skilled in a number of areas, and I'm sure what he's going to share with you tonight will be of great interest. I certainly will look forward to hearing what he's going to say. So it's a great pleasure to be able to introduce Kirao to you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the chance to share as well.
Thank you very much, Colin. Kirao, the screen and stage is all yours. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you for Colin to introduce me. And I probably have to apologize to Colin because when I was sending the contacts for person to introduce me, I said it's Dr. Colin Jackson, and I know probably you don't want to be referred as doctor. So apologies for that. But I think we always make jokes out of that. So today, I'll be going to share with you about citizen science. Yes, today we're going to talk a little bit about citizen science, and we want to use the tool or a platform, citizen science, for biodiversity conservation. And of course, I'm Kirao Lennox, and I work with Arusha, Kenya as a scientist. I work with Colin. He's my mentor, he's my boss, he's a very good colleague, and through him, I have learned a lot of things. So it's a very great pleasure, Colin, to work with you and really to get involved with the science work. So over to the topic. Let's talk about citizen science. So when we're talking about citizen science, we're talking about probably two elements where they need to come together as one. The first element is the natural world, or the environment that we live around. We interact with it so much. And then it's the general public, who are the humans, and everyone else who is living within the environment, apart from probably the wildlife. So it's actually the involvement of the general public in data collection or in the scientific field. So we're using the general public and help the scientists to collect data, to do some observations while in the field. Because within the natural world, we have a lot of things that's happened there. We have so many living things, so many interesting facts, so many opportunities to observe, and then we can share these findings, we can share these observations to the scientists, we can share these observations to different platforms that we think they can make a difference in the conservation of biodiversity. So as I talked, we're talking about the natural world, natural environment, and then humans. So this is actually participation of the public, general public in data collection, or in other words, we can say it's the involvement of the humans, probably who are not probably scientists. They can also include the scientists in collecting data of biodiversity observations and then sharing them to platforms or to avenues that people can use the data. They can see the data and then they can make good use of that, get use of the data. So who are the citizen scientists? The citizen scientists, of course, generally involves the whole general public, but then we have different sets of people within the general public. We have people who are probably passionate or who are probably employed to do some scientific research, people who are out there because that is their job. They can also be called citizen scientists because they can also use the opportunity as they work, as they've been employed by different organizations. So out of their interest, they can also do some observations within the field, probably out of their field, probably out of their taxonomic level, but of course they can do that and they can share the platform, their findings, the observations to other people. The other group of citizen scientists, they could be people who are probably like the uniformed police, some of us probably we don't consider these people as part of those people or that category of people that can contribute to collecting data, biodiversity data, because we know their work is probably just to enforce law and to make sure that everything is in the right place in terms of peace and legislations. But actually, during their own working time, they can, if they are keen enough, then they can also contribute. You don't have to be a full-time employed in terms of collecting data, but of course, out of interest, you can use that opportunity wherever you are, in which field you are, you can gather information, we can do some observations, and then you can send the information to appropriate places. Yeah, even students. These are students who came to our center here in Watamu, in Kenya, and they were involved in hunting very small plastic pellets. We call them nodules. So through these ones, then they can collect information, they can collect data, and maybe on their own sessions where they're on the beach, they are probably came to swim, they can see these small particles and they know where to send the information because we work together there. We're quite close to the beach. They can come always, so many times they've come to us and they've given us information. So still they could be primary school kids, they could be secondary school kids, but still they can participate in data collection. So in short, we can say that the whole lot of people within the environment who are interacting with the environment, they can participate, they can take part in data collection, they can be citizen scientists. It's a matter of just having some observations and then knowing where to send those observations. But what data and data forms can citizen scientists collect? What type of data do we want to collect? This brings me to one element which, as I was growing up and learning about data collection, I thought this very critical element that we need to have when we are collecting data. And one of the things is observation. What are you collecting? If it's a plastic waste, that's the observation. But without the data, when you collected these observations, it might not be very useful to the people that are going to use the data to make some decisions based on that. So very key is you have to have a date on anything that you want to collect. If it's an observation, something very important is the date. When was this observation made? So that it can help us know if you have to look back and try to compare if some things have changed within time, then we need to know that where we started this one. If it was 2020, then what's the situation now, maybe in 2022. But if you don't have date, we have, of course, an observation, but then without a date, of course, it's quite difficult. The other thing is the georeferencing. You need to have, where did you collect the observation? Where did you observe what you observed? Was it in Watamu? Was it in South Africa? Was it in Cape Town? Where exactly in South Africa? Was it if it's in Kenya? Was it, what part of Kenya was it? So you need to attach your observation to a certain location so that we can be able to attach that observation to a certain locality. So georeferencing is very important. Don't just send observation without any locality where it was observed. It might not be very helpful to the person that we're going to use. The other information is it's very good to send your contacts as well, like the photos that have been shared prior to this talk. Of course, they had some contact information, and of course, there was one who was able to explain where the photo was taken about the sun when it was coming up. So that's very important, because if someone needs to use your observation, or if he has any further information about that observation, then he might be able to contact you and probably provide more information about that. Okay, in what forms can the data be collected? the data can be collected in many forms. You can use an audio. You can probably record something if it's a bird that is calling somewhere. You can just take an audio recorder and do it. And with that, if it's being shared somewhere else with people who know maybe probably that call, then it could be identified what it is. So if you don't have a camera to take a picture of that one, but you have a phone with you, you can just do a record, and then that's still an observation. As long as it has a date, it has a GPS location, you have your contacts there, and then there's also a reference of where that observation was observed. Yeah, you can take a video as well. So this video here is one of our colleagues who is preparing a BRAV, which is it's like a tool that we use in data collection within the national park, Watamu Marine National Park. So it's a BRAV. So he's putting some bait in that container, and then he will fit in a GoPro, which is a small kind of like a camera that will record and take videos of all the species of fish or sharks or that will come to the bait of the BRAV. So you can use the video, you can take short videos, you can take long videos, and that still is an observation, which is quite important and could be used to be used for management of those areas, of those species. You can take pictures. You can just take a picture of what you see. This one is a pufferfish, which was also taken by one of our marine scientists within our organization. And this one, as long as it has a date, as long as it has a georeference, and the contact person is there, then it's good. It can be used as an observation, and it could be very, very useful in making some decisions. So you don't have to be restricted. If you don't have a camera, but you have a phone, you can use it. If you have a notebook, you can write down activities that is happening. If you are able to identify the species, you can identify the species, and then you can write down any observation that you want to, any characteristics or activity that is being done by the species, and then you can submit those observations to the appropriate places. Maybe now we need to talk to where maybe we can submit those observations. There are so many platforms. I've just selected a few that we can use because of the time that we have. We cannot exhaust everything. But the first thing is the virtual museum, which is run by the ADU, Animal Demography Unit in South Africa. Probably this is the first one that I was introduced by Dr. Colin Jackson, CJ, when I was learning about citizen science. You could take photos, you could do some observations somewhere, and then you could come back to the office, and then you could zip up to the location that you took it, if you know, within the map, and you can submit the observation. So that will have one platform, but for different species, like the virtual museum. Then you can zoom in there, and then you can submit if it's a bird, if it's a reptile, if it's an insect. Then you can go there. If it's about a plant, a dragonfly, you can all send there. The other very simple one is the Naturalists, which is being used, of course, globally. So many people have found this very simple to use. It's a matter of just having an app, and then you will be able to record observations. You could record. Sometimes you don't have to take a picture. You can just, if you know the species, if you can describe it, you can say it's kettle egret, and you can put that one, and then there will be some options of the choices that you have entered. So you can send your data to these platforms. Some of the platforms, of course, you will need some registrations. You need to be given access by the people, the administrators of the platforms, but some are quite easy. You can, as long as you have the You can download the app, you can just get an account, and then you're good to go. People, you don't have to know the species probably you are doing. You can just take a photo if you are, and then upload the photo, and people within that docket can help you to identify the species. Another interesting citizen science project where you can also submit your data is the Kenyan Batmap. But now, as I understand, it's going probably African-wise. This is one citizen science platform that is very specific to a certain class. This is birds related platform, and you have just you can use your notebook. You can use, there is now a phone application, we call it Birdlesser, which you can just download. But this one you will need to have prior registration, and then you'll be given a citizen science number, and then you can use it even for the virtual museum as well as for the Kenya Batmap or the African Batmap. And the map here, these are records that the Kenyan citizens has been able to share. It's divided in grids, and then you visit the grid for maximum, for a minimum of 2 hours, and then you qualify that list as a full protocol. But then you can also make some ad hoc presentation. The other one is the PlantNet, which is specifically for plants. You can also use that one. Another platform, which is quite a technical one. It's not very easy for anyone to submit data to this one, but the data that you've collected as a citizen scientist, once probably it's been sent to the Kenya Batmap, it has been sent to the virtual museum, has been sent to iNaturalist, we can extract that information and probably make it in a format that is recommended by this platform here, which we call it Global Biodiversity Information Facility. We can change that one into a certain format that is accepted, and then we can put those observations, the raw data, into this platform, and then people are able to access that raw data from the platform for various purposes, either for academic and even for decision making. So there's the first map, which is kind of like playing. That one is a movement of mangrove kingfisher. It's one of the species that we are studying here, and that's is the one that we're using some trackers, which was tracked here in Kenya, and we've known that it's moving all the way to Tanzania, almost to the south of Tanzania. So what happens if you have sent your data to the various platforms? You've collected your citizen science data, and it's probably now in the Kenya Batmap, it's probably now under iNaturalist, probably now under virtual museum. What do we get out of that? We could get some distribution maps. We could get some checklist out of that. We could say we can develop some conservation policies. Like this place here is a very nice breeding site for special kind of terns, roseate terns, most of them, like 90% of the birds that come here every year is a 90% roseate terns and a little bit of sooty terns. So using the data that we've been collecting and people have been submitting, these places are no-go zone for the public. It's just only when you get authorization from the managers of the park. And here we've gone there to do some studies on the breeding success of these guys. So using the data that has been spotted, has been submitted, then you are able to do those kind of decisions. Probably you are there and you're wondering how you can become a citizen scientist. I think for me, it's quite easy and straightforward. You just have to ask yourself if you really appreciate nature. Do you want to contribute to its conservation or to its well-being? And you probably do not need any special training, because if you don't know the species, that's okay. That doesn't keep you off from contributing the observation to the various platforms. As I've said, you can just take a photo, you can take a video, and people will be there to identify and help you what that is. And that data will matter a lot. So yeah, if you're a field outdoor person, you are the person we are talking about. If you don't require any training, you don't have to go to school to do this. If you just want to contribute to this course, you just take very few steps, take photos, take videos, write some notes, and send them to the platform. Yeah, you can use a notebook. People are moving away from notebooks, but I've always been reminded that notebooks are probably very key. You can refer back, you can go back and check. If you have a smartphone, of course, you can use your smartphone. You can use your camera. You can use, if you have a telescope, of course, you can do that. If you have a camera, you can do that to collect data. There's no magic in contributing to the data. You can happily do that. One interesting thing that I want to talk about is about there's this species of weaver, Clark's weaver, which it's endemic to Kenya and the coast, to Kilifi County, as a zone. And it's one thing that reminded me the importance of citizen science, because despite it being an endangered and endemic, this guy breeds in very special sites, very special conditions, in seasonal water pools. The areas that it's breeding in Ndakacha, which was discovered in 2013 actually by a group of ornithologists, including Colin. The area that is breeding, which is in Ndakacha, it's destroyed like crazy. Its destruction is going very, very fast. But then we don't have a lot of data to use so that we can protect the species in Ndakacha, which actually led to a proposal by the IUCN that we should degrade the species from endangered to vulnerable. And then it struck me, because we've been observing these changes. We have seen that the bird is probably quite difficult to see now compared to probably the last 4 or 5 years. But then we were not even recording these observations. We were not submitting them somewhere. We don't have them. We can remember that we used to see a lot. We used to spend probably less time to find them. But then we were struggling, maybe the last 2 years, it was taking us a lot of time to find them. But then when this suggestion came that we need to review and revise their IUCN status, we were shocked, because we know that the habitat is not safe. We know the population is probably not in a better state, but then we couldn't have the backup. We couldn't have the data. And this had me like almost crying, and I had to ask all the people, all the guys that they're interacting with the forest, with the habitat they are, to start recording the observations and send them to us, or send them to the Kenya Batmap, and then we can extract that. So in a nutshell, I think we need everyone in data collection. We need everyone to contribute to the conservation of the natural world, or the place that we are living. We cannot rely on only the people that have been employed to do the conservation work. They are very few, and a lot of things are happening. They are not probably in areas that the citizen science or the general public are. We cannot access probably those areas. But then if we bring in other people with very practical, small things, just recording and then submitting these observations, then they can make a difference. So we need everyone. We need the general public. It's a matter of recording them, and you just share them. And people, experts within those fields, they will do the rest of the work. They will check out the data, they will analyze the data, and they will make use of that. They will send them to the management teams. They will probably come up with conservation treaties and policies that will govern those areas, on those species, on those habitats. So we need everyone in this. And I feel like we cannot leave this only to the conservation organization or to the conservation people or fields. The whole public is needed in this. I cannot emphasize more than encouraging everyone to participate, because there's a lot that is happening, and we know that there's a lot out there that we can do and we can contribute. Yeah, so the map on this slide is about observations of human activities within a protected area, which is Araboxo Forest, as Colin has said. I was born and grew very close to this forest, probably maybe a kilometer away from the boundary of the forest. But then there's a lot that is happening. You probably cannot employ people to protect the place, like with guns. But then we can ask people around, and then they can, whenever they are in the forest, probably doing some butterfly farming, they can record, they can send us observations in a certain area, certain forms, and then we can see what is happening, and we can make some decisions on where to put more effort, where to do more patrols, where to go to speak to people about conservation and what they can do. So yeah, it's that simple. Everyone is needed, and yeah, I can't say more than that. So I think that brings me to the end of my talk, and yeah, glad to hear some reactions from you.
Thank you, Ruan. Thank you so much, Kirao, for all that information. Very informative. So I'm now going to ask the floor if there are any questions. Do you see anything, Ruan?
Nothing yet.
Oh, Andy Klee.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, thanks very much. Kirao, Asante Sana. I really enjoyed that talk. It's brilliant. Do you think encouraging more people to become involved in citizen science is a vehicle to just increase the number of people who will care about nature where they live? Your start of your sort of talk was people who care about nature and want to do something, but do you think, and have you seen any evidence of people going, oh, well, I can do a bit of that, and becoming more engaged in the issues where they are?
Thank you so much for the question, Andy. And sometimes it starts from a very small point. From my own experience, I wasn't a birder myself. I am quite a strong botanist, but then I was exposed very little, step by step, to birds by Colin Jackson. And with time now, people actually know me better as a birder than a botanist. So with time, I've always known that you can grow. Sometimes you have to cultivate the passion from people. If the people that come here, like in our center here, from the schools, very small peoples, we introduce them to something, we probably encourage them to something, and then they come with you with questions. And then with time, then they can also spread the word to the rest of the people. Sometimes maybe they will just do it because you told them to do it, but as they continue to do that, then they start developing some interest in it. So sometimes probably you don't have to have the passion really for it, but if you can work with someone a little bit, then, and you are ready there for them, you will be bombed with questions, but if you are ready for that, then you can let that person grow in that field. Yeah. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you do that and then they get bored and probably they are not so much. So you cannot bring in everyone. You would like to bring in everyone, but sometimes it's not possible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Kirao, and thank you, Andy. I'm going to take a question from somebody that I can never call by the first name, and that's Professor Liesel van As.
Hi, thank you. Kirao, thank you for the talk. I want to be a little bit of a devil's advocate. having been exposed to citizen science and iNaturalist also a little bit, and maybe Johan Creer can assist me with this. With Unlocking Nature and the development of Share Screen, the two of us has a little bit of a beer in our bonnets concerning how can we use radio to attract more people. Everybody is so focused on modern devices, but there's still a large proportion of people that, for different reasons, don't have access either to data. So, and I know in Kenya, there's quite a number of radio stations, and scarily, I think Nigeria has something like 200 local radio stations. So my devil's advocate question is, how can we use radio as an old-fashioned back-to-basics platform to get more people involved with awareness in everything?
Thanks, Juan, for the question. Yeah, it's quite interesting because even here in Kenya, not so many people have access to TV or even smartphones and all that. And it's quite difficult to reach to them. So many people are using local radio stations, and you can reach to them very easily. And I have this very practical example within our environmental department here at Arusha, Kenya. There's this energetic officer who is doing environmental studies, and her ambition was to reach many people, probably the whole of the country here in Kenya. And what she decided was to go through the local radio stations within the country, and probably just very close from around here. And from that, we could see a lot of people starting asking questions through the Facebook for Arusha, Kenya, and even following us and trying to ask many questions about plastic, and because I think she was talking more about plastics. So the challenge with that one is probably getting the opportunity to, because it's not cheap unless you have been invited by the radio presenters. If you have to use them as an avenue to create awareness to the public, then I think you have to pay a little some money, which is good money, which some of the organizations, or probably some of the parastatals, will not be able to do that. But it's very possible. I have seen that it's because everyone probably will have a radio within a homestead, and probably a neighbor, you can get a radio, you can be walking around, and then you could be hearing some announcements from a radio. So it's very possible. The challenge probably is, once you create the awareness and asking people to contribute citizen science data, how will they be able to do that? Probably then they are not digital people, so they'll have to use notebooks. But then how will the data reach you? At some point before using BirdLaser as the data collection tool for the Kenya Batmap, we used to use a data sheet. We could print a data sheet and then we could fill. And then we could send these data sheets to the administrator in Nairobi. Then she could enter them into the database for us. So it's very possible, but then there will be a cost associated to it. You will have to tell people where they can submit their records, probably a central place that you can collect, or say probably I'll have to visit this place at a certain point, so be there so that, or send your records there and then I'll come and collect them. So it's a challenge, but then it can also be used. Yeah.
Aisha, can I add something here and to Professor van As and Kiara's answer, well, question and answer? I think coming from a TV background and I completely agree with you, Kiara. It's all about money and getting advertising time. But I think the role of radio in this particular instance would not necessarily play a part in the collection of the data, but actually getting the news out there. It's very much similar to what we're doing tonight. The audience is just bigger. I mean, the audience is massive. If you get one program that you're invited to, even if it's the news or something where you can tell your story, it reaches hundreds of thousands of people. It's all about the audience. It's actually all about the audience, and radio creates that audience. So if you have one program that you can talk on about what you're doing and all the different apps and everything that's usable, then you would have made a difference. I'm absolutely sure of that. But I don't know, maybe Colin, do you want to add, does anyone want to add anything on this particular point? Holly, I know your hand was up, I'm sorry. And sorry, Aisha, for barging in like this now, but I really think it's all about advertisement, if you think about radio.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Ron. I think it's definitely an excellent way of getting people to know about citizen science projects and raising awareness about it. But the big challenge is, as Kirao mentioned, is then how do you connect people to submitting that data and actually getting hold of it? I think that's a big challenge. Certainly smartphones have really made a massive difference in being able to easily get hold of data, whereas it was only a few years ago that we were using notebooks and having to then enter on the computer on a website, and we thought that was pretty amazing that we could submit the data straight into an online database. But it was laborious and hard work, and I know Birdlasser grew out of Henk Nell's sort of disgust at having to sit down and use a notebook and enter it on a website. He said, "This is crazy, I'm never going to do that." And so he set to and designed Birdlasser, which has revolutionized bird atlasing. And it's gone that way completely, you know, iNaturalist and all the rest of it. And I know Virtual Museum has struggled over time because of not having an app which makes it easy for people to submit data directly to it. And we talked about that way back, even when I was sharing an office with Aisha. I remember that would have been discussed at times. You know, we need an app in order to make Virtual Museum much more easy to submit data to. But certainly radio is something we've discussed with Kirao and with my team about how do we get more people aware of things. But it is more an awareness, sharing information outwards. It's not nearly so easy then to get the information back, which if you don't get the data back, then there's no point in it really, in some respects.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my question was actually going to be, is there an app? So yeah, I also know that last month, iNaturalist had a challenge, and I had a bunch of friends that I go hiking with that told me about it. You know, like I saw it and everyone was excited about it. And I think that's also another way to share this, where everyone gets excited about it in the challenge and who can submit the most photos. And so you go out and explore the city and everyone's just sending in photos. So that's one way. Do you do anything like that, Kirao? It's a challenge out to the public, who can submit the most photos within like a set time, like a week or so.
No, but I think we can try. Sometimes when we have if we have these competitions, like recently we had on Saturday we had the big day, and it's not really about photos, but then it was about birding and really trying to see which country and who has recorded the most species, which is an encouragement because people want to, it's an opportunity for them to visit so many places and trying to get as many species as possible. So for those who are very keen birders, then they want to take the opportunity and visit the places. Like Colin here, he rarely gets out of the office, but then things like this one, he will be out there to do, which he did like 7 pendants. I don't know the last time he did that in a day, but it's a great opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, that's exciting. Before we continue going on about that, I need to get to Holly Magog. Sorry for the wait, Holly.
Well, that's all right. I took my hand down because so many questions came into my head at one time and answers to other people's questions that I wasn't sure about my ability to be fluid with my prose. So let's try. I think in terms of radio, but also podcasting, I know, for example, Mammal Watch is a podcast that has just become massive. And it is about people submitting their mammal spottings from all over the world. And then the podcast hosts travel to different parts of the world and it's like this competition of where's the most mammal rich area in 48 hours. So that's like a big sort of challenge that, you know, if you had a podcast and built that interest. So I think that's where it can be a bit different to radio, but I do think that smartphones have revolutionized. But if we can get into schools with radios, I know there was one group, and I think this was in Argentina. Do you remember on the old phones, you used to be able to ask for a number and it was a free call. So you could ring direct to services and get so they started that for citizen science. So that was a free line sponsored by the phone companies, and that collected data. Where that went to now, I have no idea. So that was in response to that, and I'm afraid everything else has disappeared, because I did have like 3 questions, but I'm afraid there was too many interesting things. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Oh,
Holly.
no, wait, there was one thing. No, I do remember. Kirao and the weavers. So one of the things that I know is a difficult challenge is if the IUCN uplists a species, that often makes it very difficult for citizens to enact conservation plans, because now that species is protected and government has to be involved. So specifically with some species, you're going to have citizens submitting data that means the species might be uplisted, whereas you as a conservation organization want to keep your hands free to be able to conserve it in a way that only you know how and not governments. So Kirao, what's your kind of response to that, and have you come across that?
That's tricky, Holly. But I think for our situation here in Kenya, of course, when an endangered species, or like this one, which is actually endemic to a very small area, and we expect that the government will be there to enforce the law about the conservation and all that. But sometimes if this species is probably outside the protected area, like the places in Dakacha, and actually the habitat that they depend, probably maybe not, people are not killing the bird, but the habitat that they depend, that's where they breed, that's the only confirmed area that they breed. It's being destroyed. And even probably not conservationists, because the bad guys are probably just doing that because that's a job. Probably they are not even passionate about conservation. That could be another reason. They're not passionate about conservation. But then now they've been taking long and long to see a species that a few years ago they were able to see it within a few minutes. Then that means probably there's something which has changed. Either the birds has moved to another place, or probably there are not very many within that area. Probably the population is decreasing and all that. So there's, of course, there will be that, one call it like a fight where the conservation group wants to make sure that the bird is there so that they can put more effort in conservation. But then if there's evidence that things have changed, that probably has affected the species, and there's a body here who says that probably maybe not very bad things have happened that affect the species, then that's where we have a friction. But if we don't have data to show that, or to back up our observations, then it becomes difficult, because we cannot really fight and say, hey, this is what is happening, because we cannot prove what is happening or what we are seeing, because it's not been that this is actually what is happening. So they're using information, probably an estimated kind of like information on fad information, because probably maybe they went in one area and they saw very many observations, and these areas that we are talking about, they have not been paying more attention. So sometimes it's difficult because if a species is within a certain range, a certain locality, and one area is being destroyed and the other area is probably not being destroyed, then if you only go to one area which is not being destroyed, then it can give you as well false information. But I think Colin can add more information with that, because I think he's studying that for many years than I am. I'm very new to the field. But Colin, please come in and help.
It's an interesting point. And Holly, I wonder though, I think your question of asking whether upgrading a species or sort of to a higher status of threat would mean that it's harder for conservation organizations, conservationists to work to conserve it. Was that more or less what you were saying, potentially? Because I'd question that. I think actually as a conservationist, and with this particular issue that Kirao, this example Kirao gave of the Clark sweeper, when we heard that it was potentially going to be downgraded, that to us was a greater threat. And we really made a big noise about, no, this is ridiculous. It can't be, because by having it as a higher, because we know that it's a threatened species, we know that the habitat that it depends on is fast going. Having it remain as an endangered species rather than just near threatened or reduced in some way, it means that we can actually put more leverage on the government to take action to protect that area, and to even, well, the government in Kenya is not going to provide funds, but we can get funds from other donors, because of that threat level of the species is high. As soon as the level decreases, then the word goes out, well, oh, it's not so threatened, it's not a problem anymore, it's doing okay, so we can relax and get on with it. And so I think actually it's the real usefulness of the IUCN Red List classification is that it gives you a massive lever to government and to really put pressure on government officials, because when they understand that this is considered globally threatened at this endangered level, then you can press the sort of red buttons and make much more noise about it. So I would say it's the other way around. I think we, personally as a conservation organization, Arosha, together with other partners we work with, really push. Obviously, you want it to be accurate and correct. You don't upgrade species that are not. It doesn't make sense. But where a species is under serious threat and habitat is fast going, and that is not being recognized by the authorities that are, then you want to make a noise about it and make sure it remains that way.
Well, good luck, Kirao, with all of these things with the weaver.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you for the answers, Kirao and Colin. There's a question in the chat from Julia Lloyd. There has been some answers, but Kirao, can you answer, how do we handle misidentification of species during citizen science?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think we've experienced that. Sometimes you have, I think, for the case of our project, the Kenya Batmap, we have a committee who are actually vetting the records that are submitted by the citizen scientists. So you don't let everyone to do it. Sometimes it's misleading if you don't have a committee. I think there are some platforms like the virtual museum sometimes, or Naturalists, you have someone saying this, you have someone saying this. But then for the record of the Kenya Batmap, we have very specific people who are very knowledgeable in that field, and it's only upon them to vet. Sometimes it takes longer because these people probably they're not available full time, but then we trust their judgment, and we know these are the people that can only be used to vet the records. They don't just go there. So with so many records that are being uploaded to the Kenya Batmap, but then they will have to wait probably for a month or weeks, depending on the availability of the vetters. But then they will have to do that. Otherwise, then we'll be having very wrong identification of the species, and which will not help in the conservation. Yeah, so I think there's a need to have a committee that people will be able to, they're recommended, and we know they're very, very good in those fields, and then they can vet the reports. There's no rush in that.
Yeah. I remember when I was sharing an office with Colin, and I was part of the animal demography unit, the BDI now. My job as an intern was to then facilitate and send it out to the different. So if there was a reptile picture coming in, then I'd send it to a reptile expert, and then they would identify it properly, or make sure that the identification given was the right one. So I know behind the scenes, there's a lot of work that goes in before the data is captured. Okay, so thank you, Caro. There's another question. Is there a fine line between citizen science and needing a research permit? I'm not sure if it was answered in the chat.
It was a few, it's actually a chat in itself between the different opinions and whatnot. But Kiara, if you have, please go.
I think it depends on where you're coming from. Some other countries will ask you for permits before you can collect any information, even if it's from your farm, your own, like in front of your house. Some people will need to ask you for permits to do that. I think some other countries probably they won't bother to do that. So we won't actually require permits. I think for us here in Kenya, there is that kind of like, if you're doing research, I think probably for academic, for your own kind of like project, you will be required to get some permits. But for the citizen science, I think we have not had very many problems about getting a certificate to do that. We were doing that, and we submitting the data, and of course we involving the government to make use of the data. We try to encourage them to be part of that, and they know what is happening. So they are part of that. So it depends where that is happening.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it's going to depend on location, country, even province. In South Africa, there are different laws and regulations just concerning filming permits. They differ from province to province, even from within a province, from one area to a next. So it's going to differ for each one. It's a good answer. Lovely.
Yes.
In the chat, there's a lot of the chat's very lively tonight with everything in misidentification and whatnot. Aisha, it's all yours. I'm scrolling, seeing if there are.
I'm also looking. I see chats. I don't see questions being asked. I see Dr. Llewellyn Taylor says that it's important to remember that the identification is based more on morphological and external anatomical detail, and very often more detail on other diagnostic characters is necessary for the identification. I think, like you said, Ruan, I remember when we got the data, we also looked at where, and it's not just in terms of sort of a province or a city. There's a frog, I can't get to the name now. It's the rain frog. I can't remember the scientific name, but there's two different species that look similar, and one is on the mountain and one is on the lower part of the mountain, on the flat land. And so they look similar, but I think all that is taken into consideration as well. But I don't know, Kirao, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge, and I think it happens across different fields, different species. But sometimes for us, even for the people that we know they're very good in those fields, and then they say that they have seen this thing in areas that we know probably they are not seen there. Then we ask for additional information, like, do you have a photograph, or were you alone, and any other information that can be used to back up the observation, or the observation that has been made is needed. So we don't just say because this one is a very good person in this field, we still need some additional information to confirm that observation or that scenario. So yeah, that's very possible. Some species like butterflies are very, very close, and it's just a kind of like a certain line within the wing that gives it difference to the other species. So it's possible, but then if you have photographs of that, if you can get a photograph of that species, then it can help.
Yes, I agree. The species genus was Breviceps, and they found on different what is it? Parts of the mountain.
Okay.
Locations on the mountain. I'll get to the word now, but let's go to Ollie Magog.
I actually just wanted to come in on misidentification, and one of the things that I found fascinating is how bioacoustic data is being used. So they're asking people to send in samples, geotag, but then the initial sound, definitely, like who's making the sound is done by people who know, but then machine learning and algorithms take over. So actually all of that data is processed, and usually there's a very small margin of error, and they're finding way more species and ones that they didn't even think occurred in places. And that's me. I didn't have a question. Sorry, Kirao.
Wow, I didn't know that they're using machine learning.
Just to add to that, Holly, Aisha, sorry, you wouldn't know, but Steph Albertine, who's a colleague of ours, and myself were discussing it. A machine that he bought to recognize bat sounds, which is quite remarkable that him and Dave Pepler are using. That is absolutely astounding technology that we spoke of the other day. Aisha, Julia Lloyd and her team there from Kenya has a question that's really interesting, because I remember a study done on it, and they're asking any type of collection, and then with reference to roadkills, do those also count? It's a very good question.
Asking if, can you come up again with the question?
Roadkills. So any animals found on the roads that have been driven over, roadkills, do they count as sightings?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question, but
I see Colin is shaking his yes.
sometimes maybe
Yeah.
you don't know if it's been brought there by somebody, or it depends. If probably the animal is found within that area, you can't say, but then it could be a specimen observation, but then there is also a risk of having been brought there by something else. But Colin, maybe.
Yeah, I think there is a risk of that. I think on the whole, though, roadkills are definitely considered as good data. The challenge might be the exact date, but particularly if it's an old one that's obviously been there for some time. But normally a location for a roadkill would be considered as a good location for that species. However, I do know when I worked at the museum way back, we did have a specimen brought into us that had been killed by a car, but it got caught in the radiator of the car as it flew across the road. And they didn't know where they hit it. They just pulled it out of the radiator when they got home. So in a way, that was a roadkill, but that one didn't really count as much more than a dead bird. But yeah, I think there's definitely value in roadkills. And I have stopped on many occasions and checked squashed birds and animals on the roads.
I remember as a student, we also did it for one of the professors, Professor Ubekok, ages and ages ago. We every single roadkill we made a note of and we sent it to him. So yeah, interesting times. Aisha?
I don't see anything else.
There's Marty has a question, his hands up.
Yay. Okay.
Thanks, Kirao, for your talk. It's always very interesting, and I can relate. I've been involved in a number of citizen science type projects. I've been doing bird ringing. We do it at Melville Corpies, and all the information that gets gathered from that goes to Safring. The other, when traveling in the national parks, etc., they have various competitions and things where, for example, if you see yellow-billed oxpeckers, you need to send your photographs with your positions, etc., of where those occurred to the different projects, as well as cheetah sightings and wild dog sightings. I'm just interested to know, because I tend to not send them in as quickly as I should probably. You know, if you've been on holiday and then you only get around to processing your photos maybe 2-3 months later, as long as you've captured the date when you got it in the correct position, when is it almost too late to send that information in for these bodies to actually use the information? So, I mean, is there like a sort of time limit that you have to have sent your information in from the date of observation, or are they still happy if you send them photographs from kind of years back? I'm just interested about that. And then also maybe to give some more feedback by the organizations that get the information that citizen scientists submit to continually give us feedback on observations that we've made. I think that would be good.
Okay, thanks so much, Jesper, for your question and for your participation in the various citizen science project that you've done. And I think on your first question, when is too late to submit citizen science data, I think we have historical data, which we need that. So I wouldn't say the data submitted could be late. Of course, maybe sometimes it could be late in terms of probably that data would have been used maybe few months ago. That have been very helpful to make some decisions, but since it wasn't there, then it was not be able to be used. But then if the record has been missubmitted, either it's 10 years later or even 15 years later, it could still be used, because then we have those historical data that people can use them either for studies or for even making decisions. And also that they can also show the changes with the course of time, because probably maybe you'll have so many records by then, and probably now you have few, or probably you had very few then. Now we have very many records that are being submitted this time. So historical data is also very important, and people are actually, you shouldn't feel shy to send your records, even if they are 10 years older. Since you
okay, cool. And will those organizations still use it? That's kind of more my question, because sometimes I feel, you know, I don't get around to it, and then right. you wonder if they're actually going to bother, or you're just wasting time.
Sometimes actually it's probably it's not even the organization that's going to use the data, but even anyone who, if the data is freely available from the platforms, then people can access them. They can do a search, and then you get the records. Recently, when we were starting our geolocator project, which is a project that we're trying to understand two African migrants birds, mangrove fish and red cap robin chat, we had a search of everywhere if these species has been seen and when was the last, like when they were being seen. So sometimes they can help someone who is doing a project, can help someone who is probably trying to understand some changes over time for that species. So it's probably even the guys that develop the app or even the project might not probably need them at that particular time, but there are so many people out there who would be looking for data and historical data as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Marky, for the question. I see Rion Lum. Sion, may we ask you to unmute, please?
Hi, everyone. This is just to answer Marty. Marty, the guy's running the EWT project on the wild dogs, for example. He's one of my peers and former TUT students. But to answer you on that, what we need to keep in mind with a lot of these projects, and especially if email addresses are given, is a lot of the data that are being collected are there to inform the distribution of species, and not necessarily, the main aim is not necessarily to have live data that are immediately accessible. So please always send backlog data, even if your data is 5 years or 10 years old. Those are often the type of data sets when Grant Beverly and the guys sit behind the computers and receive that photo, it's like, wow, you know what, this may actually have been the missing link with the location of the photograph and the individual, whatever. When it comes to the ground hornbills with the rings around the legs, or the wild dogs, and as you say, the cheetahs and the yellow-billed oxpeckers. So never ever think that the data is not worth submitting. It may not serve a dual purpose, but it will definitely serve a purpose, and it goes into a database. Often it can, years forward or in the future, years ahead, they can also be used in other projects, as has been mentioned. I think one of the organizations that has done a very good and sterling job for reporting back to the contributors is the Birdmap project, which is really what I think tonight's talk, by the way, thank you very much, Kirao, very, very nice talk, has been based around, is the guys from Birdmap, specifically Sanja Rose. They are so good with communication and feedback on email, and giving accolades to citizen science, the contributors of data. So yeah, it depends, and from organization to organization. But I think my message is to Marty and to anyone out there, anyone from the public contributing data, it's never in vain. Please, even if it's very, very old, it's not going to be frowned upon. You're not going to get a whack over the fingers or anything. You actually may be that missing link that they've needed. Cool, thanks.
Cool, thanks. I hope I'm not the real missing link. But John, no, thanks. And then just talking about AI, I hope there's going to develop some good AI so that I can scroll through all my hundreds of thousands of photographs to actually pick out the different sightings I have, so make it easier for me to send the info. That's my problem.
Thank you. So Kirao, I know you spoke about the questions or the type of information that you ask for. So can you just explain maybe on the page where you submit, the web page where you submit the photos, the questions that you ask there, is it like the species name as the location, and then is the time included as a question, or do you then contact the person who submitted the photo, or the voice or the sound or anything?
You asking me to explain more about the photos?
Yeah, the web page or the application page. Or the submission page. What kind of questions are asked there?
All right, okay, thanks. So this is on the platforms that people can submit. All right, I think one very critical question is when did you see the observation, which is now comes into the depth. They will need to know when you did that, when the observation was made. And the other thing is they will ask you, most of the application we're using, if you have a phone or application on the phone, they will zoom it. They will, if you have to log in now an object, will give you a coordinates, a reference point of where it's supposed to be. Well, for the case of the virtual museum, which probably you have to come back and see it in your computer, then they will provide you a map, and then they will ask you to give your best location guess, like to zoom into a certain field. So that's very important, because then you know that's where it's been collected. And another important thing is the contacts of the person, of the observer. If there's any question that they will need to probably make comments verification that someone needs to do, then they know whom to contact. They can go back there and then they can get the contacts of that person. I think those are the most important things. Probably you don't have to know the species, of course. People might be there to help you with that.
Yeah. But I think then by then you'll have the morphological data, you'll have the time it was seen, and you'll have the locality, which is really something to base it on.
I think for platforms that are very specific, then they could ask for activities of the species, the observations. If it's breeding, or if it's that. But that depends on if you are able to do that. If you can add in more information about it, the better. If you cannot, at least those will be absence and presence of that observation. So.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Caro. And then, oh, Colin, are you adding or asking? I hope you're adding.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add a little thing, actually, just backtracking a little bit to what Marty was asking about what sort of records should be submitted, and whether old ones are relevant. Old ones definitely are relevant, however out of date you might think they are. But the other thing which I think a lot of people tend to think are not important to submit are common species and records of things that you see all the time. Because you think, that's just a common bird or animal or butterfly or flower. I see it all the time. I don't need to submit it. But actually, those data are also extremely useful because they form, they allow you to do some very neat statistics on the status of other species that are around. And often you'll find the common species become uncommon. And suddenly you don't realize it because nobody's been bothering to record the common ones. And you suddenly realize that they've actually disappeared or their numbers have declined. And so that's something else I'd really encourage anyone who's working in citizen science and working with members of the public to help them value the importance of submitting the common species and not just the uncommon ones. In fact, that's one of the things about the Bird Atlas, why it's such a strong protocol for it, is because what it really pushes the observer to do is to submit a full species list every time they go out. So that means even the common species are submitted, whereas other data collection sort of citizen science ones, eBird started off the other end. They've now moved towards that, but in the air, they started off by saying, if you see a bird, tell us about it. And that meant that people would submit the ones they thought were interesting and not the common ones. And that really screws up the data, in fact. So yeah, I think that's just something I wanted to add.
Thank you, Colin. I agree with you on that. Let me get to Holly sooner rather than later.
And I promise you this is the last thing I'm going to say. But again, Marty, your question sparked a lot. And one thing is, firstly, AI does exist and is being used. There are sites you can load all your photos up to, and the AI will work. And usually places like that will rely on 4 or 5 people giving the same identification before that photo is automatically filed. One of those is Snapshot Serengeti, and if nobody has been on, or if you haven't been on Snapshot Serengeti's website, have a go. That's Armchair Traveling. And just a very interesting thing is that if you are a specialist in something, you're looking specifically for that. And so you tend to not think of the things that were submitted that don't matter to you. But one example with Snapshot Serengeti that I always found fascinating is some guy in America who was a doctor, who was busy doing his 700 photos for the evening, realized that a lot of these photos had giraffe knees in them, and the knees had a fungus on them, and that fungus looked specifically like something he was studying that happened in humans. So he managed to write to Snapshot, get all the photos of giraffe knee funguses, and then to get some samples, and it turned out that that fungus was the same fungus found in humans. So this is something that you would never think to study, and this is why citizen science is also super, super important. And that's it, I'm done, I promise.
Thank you, Ali.
If that's okay with you. Hey, Yuan, you're waving your hand. Do you have a question?
I had no question. I would just like to take the opportunity to also thank Rion. He made a huge contribution to our GIS course earlier this year at ShareScreen. So thank you for Rion and Sayon that donated the course free of charge.
Wonderful. Rion, want to add to that?
Hi, Johan and Rowan, thank you very much. Yes, that was lovely to present to. I think did we have close to 100 participants, I think. So yes, you do go have a look at the the introductory GIS course with all the follow-up speakers on Share Screen Africa. So yeah, thank you very much, Johan and the team for that opportunity. That was great.
Wonderful.
And
Okay,
he made a huge difference at Hindumu. So he's alumni from TUT, and he left his footprint there, and he started off the bird squad. And those bird boys knew the birds better than what I did or Rion did in the beginning. And wow, those kids haven't stopped. So Rion, I would like to say thank you. You made a huge difference in the youth, and it's still there. One of your bird boys or bird squads is a teacher now, and there's a few that are online to become a NatCon. So well done, all thanks to your good work.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for those comments. I think what more can we ask for than to leave somewhat of a legacy? But yes, yeah, I've been commenting on a lot of stuff on the group today and on the chat rather. And but my passion is birds, and it's really ornithology and ecology is where my heart lies. But teaching the older ones, that's a privilege, and I often enjoy teaching postgrads, adults, and yes, all the learners alike. Thanks, Cheryl, for those opportunities. Fond memories.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Aisha, I think on that beautiful note, I'm going to thank Kirao again and his team and everyone who's been listening. Give you another round of applause. Well done. Brilliant talk. Brilliant work that you're all doing. And then to everyone who has shared his story tonight, thank you very much for joining us or tuning in. It's like a radio station, but thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening, a good morning or an afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. Enjoy, and I hope to see you, me and the team, Maret, Yuan, Aisha, Chris, who's already left. Thank you very much for everything, making this possible and making this work. Thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful evening, and it's been a privilege to have you on Unlocking Nature. Good evening,
thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah, thank you too. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.